It's summer. We're going outside, but we're still watching TV. Just ask Netflix and Apple and everybody else, Amazon, all of our friends who have amazing networks. We've all cut the cord. We're all streaming. Find out what to watch this summer. Coming up next. I'm Eric Mitchell, and this is To The Point. We spend a lot of time streaming. Over the last few years, cable companies have really felt the push for us to cut the cord. And in the last 13 weeks, more and more of us are doing it, with outlets like YouTube TV, Hulu live streaming, and the countless others that are out there. Plus, you have Netflix and Amazon TV. You also have HBO and Cinemax teamed up to bring you HBO Cinemax or HBO Max, whatever the bleep they're calling it. Stars, all these networks, including NBC releasing Peacock later in 2020, have these amazing streaming platforms. So the need to stream has never been higher. Much like having Top Gun 2 come out, we feel the need for streaming. See what I did? You missed it. It's Fan Friday. I'm supposed to do this thing. Anyways, we have an amazing guest today. Marc Berman is here. We're going to talk about why more and more folks are cutting the cord, and two, what to watch this summer. So when it's dark and you're in your house, after you've worn your mask all day, you sit down, what do you watch? What is out there? What are our options? So learn more. We're going to learn more. We're not going to learn more after this message. No, we're going to learn more, and we're going to welcome to the show our amazing guest, TV critic Marc Berman, coming up after these messages. Welcome to the show, Marc. How you doing today, bud?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I am looking forward to the 4th of July. This year doesn't feel like it has the same buzz the 4th of July normally has. Fireworks. No. Just 2 short years ago, my family and I were in New York, where we like to spend our holidays because we have family there. My little brother lives there, so we go around his work schedule since his is less flexible than the rest of us. We were there. We watched the Macy's fireworks. We actually stayed at the Dominic in Soho, which we were up on a higher floor and had a beautiful, number one, the Dominic is a beautiful hotel, but just an amazing view of the fireworks. It was so powerful. It's something my kids still talk about to this day. So the 4th's a little different, but we have good TV coming out. So I guess we'll make up for it. Excited today. We'll talk about it here in a second. We have Hamilton comes out today on Disney Plus, so excited about that. We always get excited about Disney Plus stuff in my house. It's anything Star Wars, Disney, Marvel related always wins. But let's talk about the sad news this week in the passing of Carl Reiner. An amazing movie and TV star. He will definitely be missed, even as an older gentleman. Most millennials, you'll recognize him from those Oceans 11, 12, 13, however many movies they did. But you'll recognize him in those movies, and those of us a little bit older will recognize Carl from so many amazing projects that he worked on. So what's your thought on him passing and the legacy that he left behind in TV and movie?
Well, you know what? Let's look at it this way. Carl Reiner was 98 years old. That's a good age to live to. Nevertheless, it's very sad because you know what? He's one of those TV pioneers that really didn't get the credit he deserved. And I'm going to give him that credit now because he really was on the forefront of television. He was on a show back in 1950 with Sid Caesar. And that was on Saturday night. It was a Your Show of Shows, it was called. It was a live 90-minute sketch comedy. Remember, this was 1950. This was 70 years ago. And the show ran for 4 seasons. It was an enormous hit. And it was 90 minutes of sketch comedy. So to the people out there that seem to think that Saturday Night Live was the forefront of that type of comedy. That's totally not true. I mean, your show of shows was I mean, look, it was 1950, so anything you did was really different. But it was funny, it was popular, it was just so comically brilliant. And Carl Reiner appeared, he acted, he performed, and he also wrote for that show. And that was, from 1950 to 1954. Unfortunately, we don't ever get to see it because it wasn't produced in a way that is conducive to having repeats. So, I have to give him, hats off. I mean, that show had a lot of different talent on it. He worked with Mel Brooks on it. And, to this day, he and Mel Brooks were very good friends. Mel Brooks just turned 94. Thankfully, he's, alive and well. And then after your show of shows, he went on to another Sid Caesar show called, it was Caesar's World, I believe, or Caesar's Place. That ran for a number of seasons after that. And again, he started writing on that show. He worked with a young Woody Allen. Woody Allen was one of the writers. Neil Simon was a writer on your show of shows. So back then, he was on the forefront of comedy. But of course, he's remembered for creating the Dick Van Dyke Show. And a little bit of history on that. I won't get into it too much, but he played Rob Petrie in the pilot, or Rob Petrie, however you pronounce it. It had a different title. It was called Head of the Family. It had a different cast. He was Rob Petrie. CBS didn't pick it up. So Carl Reiner retooled it as the Dick Van Dyke Show. And you have to remember that the Dick Van Dyke Show premiered in 1961 at a time when the top-rated comedy was Hazel. You had fluffy, family, mindless comedies. You had the Beverly Hillbillies was the #1 sitcom in 1962. And Dick Van Dyke was a sophisticated comedy about an adult couple at home and his relationship at work. So it was something we never saw before. It almost didn't get renewed for a second season. CBS wanted to cancel it. Procter & Gamble sponsored it. They, protested. CBS brought it back. It immediately got into the top 10 in season 2. It lasted for 5 seasons. It could have lasted way longer. But Carl Reiner decided, he wanted to, leave while he was still ahead. And then he went on to a very prolific career in movies, both as an actor, as a writer, as a producer, as a director. And this was a man that, he wrote books. He just was a producer, director, writer, a little bit of everything. And of course, he's the father of Rob Reiner. So there's a lot of talent in that family. So I really have to take my hat off, so to speak, for Carl Reiner, because he's a pioneer in our industry. He never really got the attention he deserved, in my opinion. And today's Thursday. Tomorrow evening, CBS will be honoring him with 2 colorized episodes of the Dick Van Dyke Show, beginning at 8 o'clock.
Ooh,
so
that's awesome.
Well, you know what it is. It's sad because in later years he appeared on Hot in Cleveland as Betty White's boyfriend on the show. And Betty White, of course, is also 98. She's a few months older than Carl Reiner. And, it gets you to thinking that all these pioneers from yesteryear, unfortunately, you can't live forever. And it's sad to see them pass away. I mean, Dick Van Dyke is 94. As I said, Mel Brooks is 94. Look at Norman Lear. He's 98. And Carl Reiner was in that club. Mm-hmm. So congratulations to him. He had a 7-decade career. Amazing talent, and I wish somebody would repeat. I wish they could show us your show of shows. So
absolutely, that's good. And while you were talking, I was curious on his amazing career. He literally, besides his son being ridiculously talented and bringing us some of the best movies ever, what is crazy is to go look at through all of the movies. If you think about the folks that he's been with. The Jerk with Steve Martin, of course, the Ocean series, the 8 million that they made. Those were actually funny. He was a hilarious character in all of them. Just the way that they brought him in to be part of this young, hip gang. Oh, God. The man, he did a lot with Steve Martin. I did notice that as I'm looking through this. He spent a lot of time doing stuff with Steve Martin. You've got Where's Summer School? These are all great. Summer Rental. Movies that I just loved growing up watching as a kid. And TV shows. Talk about, he was one of the OGs, started it all, and talking about Dick Van Dyke. But he was also in 2.5 Men, which I didn't even realize when you start talking about shows that were successful and funny. He's always been part of it. So I mean, Ally McBeal. I mean, he's just been everywhere. So his loss was truly felt. And yes, 98 is a long time to live. And the Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, what's great is to see Dick Van Dyke still popping up in things, which we all love Dick Van Dyke. So it's great to hear. I never knew that Dick Van Dyke was almost canceled. I never knew that in the first season, because I remember watching that with my grandparents. Of course, it was syndicated because this was in the 80s and I was born in the 70s. But watching those shows, it's like I spend a lot of time, and I tell my kids, because we talk about older TV shows that I like to watch. And, part of our interview today, we also have Butch Patrick, who played Eddie Munster of many acting roles, is, the guest who follows you today. And just learning about the 60s, and when he talks about, I worked for Walt Disney, like, he didn't just work for Walt Disney Company, he worked for Walt Disney, like the actual human, the physical brains behind TV, and hearing about how we transitioned from black and white. 40 short years ago, TV was still black and white, and we'd made this conversion over to color. And then you've got to see how TV has, Mark, you've watched so much TV. Just a question that comes off as we transition from Carl to kind of what you talk about. What do you think of the way TV's changed so much, right? You take from Carl starting in the 50s when TV was brand new, right? And sketch comedy, 90 minutes, sponsored by cigarette companies and Procter & Gamble. I mean, things you don't see now. The Texaco guys, right? Running out and the Texaco commercials. How much would you say TV has changed? And if the folks that created this and started this back in the day could go back and go, what do we have now? Where nudity and profanity was forbidden, and now it's even on network TV. It's very common. I remember when Ellen kissing another woman was the most controversial thing ever. I thought NBC was going to burn to the ground, and now it's 2020, and you look at what we're putting on TV now. So what's your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I want to say the one thing that I love about TV from yesteryear, and the Dick Van Dyke Show is a perfect example of this. It ran for 5 seasons, which is not an enormously long run, but here's the nice thing about it. There was 158 episodes. So back then, a typical season was 30 episodes, 32 episodes. And it's interesting, you mentioned Butch Patrick. He was on the Munsters. This is an interesting fact that nobody really realizes. The Munsters and the Addams Family, they premiered within a week of each other. They each only ran for 2 seasons. That's it. But you had about 72 episodes, because back then you did a lot of them. So that's the one big thing that I really miss about the older days is you had, when you had a TV show, you had a season running from September through May through sometimes June, and it's not like that anymore. But I do want to say, and I just want to say one more thing about Carl Reiner, because this is such a cool fact that I don't think a lot of people realize. He played Alan Brady on the Dick Van Dyke Show. He also played Alan Brady in a guest spot on Mad About You in 1995 and won an Emmy. So I think that's that was really a nice, kind of a way to end the role. But in terms of TV itself, and I say this all the time, I think some of the best television in history comes from yesteryear. And it's not to say that we don't have some really good content now, because we really do. But if you look at again, we mentioned the Dick Van Dyke Show. We mentioned your show of shows. You mentioned, Isle of Lucy in the 50s. Then you went into the 70s. You had all the Norman Lear stuff. You had Mary Tyler Moore. The 80s brought Hill Street Blues, 30-something. And there was something about each of those shows that was so unique and different.
So, Mark, one of the big things is we have a lot coming out. It's the 4th of July weekend, basically. I always think, I know summer starts technically 2 weeks ago. We started summer, but it seems like July 4th is really when we start kicking in more and more releases. I know typically movie releases have come out. I remember Independence Day, the first one. I don't recognize the second film as a movie because that thing was horrible. But the first Independence Day, everything comes out around this time. So today, July 3rd, we have Hamilton was released early, much like the Michael Jordan documentary was pushed forward into April, so it gave us some sports. We have Hamilton this weekend starting on Disney Plus, like we talked about earlier. I know Apple's releasing a couple new series. Just last weekend, HBO released, which was perfect timing, and I'm pretty sure they did it on purpose, kind of like Space Force launching Space Force and then launching SpaceX the day of the next day release. Perfect timing, by the way. But HBO just did the Golden State Killer, started that series, which if you haven't started watching it, I highly recommend. I completely didn't realize that was Patton Oswalt's, his wife who passed away, who did this documentary. It's a great doc. But we have Hamilton. What else do you see? What are you recommending this weekend? If we're sitting at home, obviously more things are getting shut down than open, so more time at TV. What's some talk about some oldies but goodies that are out there, and then we're going to get to your top 5 list. But what are you kind of thinking? If you think of Americana, what films are you watching during the 4th of July weekend?
You know what film I always watch during this weekend? It's just something that I enjoy the beginning of the summer. I'm a very, very big Alfred Hitchcock fan. And I just, I always, seek. I would actually go to the theaters and to see his movies, because there's something about watching a Hitchcock film in a theater and seeing the reaction. Rear Window, to me, is a summer film. Jimmy Stewart, and it basically, I'm sure everybody knows the story of this, but it's a summer film, and it's probably my favorite Hitchcock film, and that to me always signals the beginning of the summer. The same way, once we get to Labor Day, my classic film is Picnic, with William Holden and Kim Novak, because that took place during Labor Day, so that ends the summer. But to me, it's always like, my go-to destination always is TCM, because I think, I was watching last night, I was watching a Gene Kelly musical with Debbie Reynolds, Singing in the Rain. I feel like during a pandemic, during this, which we're hopefully getting out of now, or moving past it, I like innocence. I want to feel good. I want to feel happy. That's Americana. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers was just on TCM that I DVR'd. So to me, it's a lot of classic. A lot of old movies, a lot of TV series. Any holiday weekend like this one is the Twilight Zone. There's always a Twilight Zone marathon. My only complaint about that is they run the same episodes, which are brilliant. But there's so many episodes of the original Twilight Zone. Give us more variety. But of course, there's a lot of original content. And the first thing I have to recommend is I had the opportunity, the last time we spoke, I had recommended Dead to Me on Netflix. And I watched the second season. 10 episodes each season, so it's easy to get past. I absolutely loved it. It was so reminiscent to me. Let me go back. It reminded me of the old serialized dramas like Knots Landing, or really Desperate Housewives. There was, a lot of, it got a little kooky in the second season, a little over the top, but oh my God, it is an absolute addiction. It's an absolute addiction. And then, of course, we're not going to the movies this weekend unless it's a drive-in movie. People are not going to be flocking to the theaters, so there's so many different options out there to watch. The Netflix, this is not a movie, but Netflix is introducing the Babysitters Club, which I know a lot of people are looking forward to, about a group of teenage girls that I think is something worth seeking. And as always, Netflix is the go-to destination. They have so much content. Hulu actually just announced the second season. It's a satirical comedy called The Great, which I actually like. If you haven't seen the first season, I would check it out. I talked about Unorthodox last time. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's only 4 hours, and you're going to get through it in one sitting, because you're not going to be able to put it down. I also recommend going outside and getting some air and getting some sunshine and walking around. And, we've been cooped up for so long in our houses. It's been about 4 months already, but the beauty of this era of peak TV, we have over 500 scripted options of programming available to watch. And there's so many different places to go. And if you want to feel good, if you want to just escape, go back to, the good old days, go to Disney Plus. They did such a good job of debuting, of having great content, and it's just working to their advantage. It's gotten a lot of buzz. If you haven't seen The Mandalorian, which is also called Star Wars The Mandalorian, that's something that you would probably definitely want to watch. So many different ththings that you could catch up on. Yeah. And, one show, we don't have a new season, unfortunately, but I will always recommend The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh, yes.
And I mean, have you watched that?
I absolutely love. My wife and I started watching that, and we were blown away by the acting, the cast. It's a fabulous show, and it makes you feel good. It's tastefully done. It's funny. I mean, you find yourself kind of watching it, not knowing what to expect, kind of getting that Mad Men vibe from it, and then you just start laughing because here she is, and again tells an amazing story from an era I was not alive, but always wondered because we talk about comedy. I love comedies. I love laughing. There's nothing better. But when you think about where we've come, from George I was raised on Robin Williams, Carlin, Billy Crystal, Whoopi. To me, the funniest human beings on earth was watching those three stand on a stage during something called Comic Relief in the early 80s. I mean, Robin Williams and Billy Crystal together was just, I don't even know if they turned that into a drug, people would OD. It was amazing to watch because they're so good together. But, watching these comedies from older was great. And I think that's what Marvelous Miss Maisel really touches on is here's, divorce and all these other topics. I don't want to blow it for anybody who hasn't started watching it. But Amazon has crushed it on that, and The Man in the High Tower. I think they absolutely, when it comes to Amazon, those are the two shows that I always tell people is like, if you haven't checked those out, go. Because you get these Disney haters that are like, I'm not watching Star Wars, I don't like Marvel, and I'm like, well, if you like DC, go over to HBO Max. They've got all the DC there. I mean, it's so nice now, and as I said in the beginning of the show, I was talking about, we live in an era where streaming is the way to go. I mean, literally, if Netflix doesn't have it, you can go to Hulu, and there's a good chance Hulu has it. And if Hulu doesn't have it, you can head over to Disney Plus. And if Disney Plus doesn't have what you're looking for, HBO Max has everything on the other side of the house. And then you start adding in these other amazing networks that have blossomed up. I mean, Amazon TV is amazing. I mean, there's just so many options we have now to watch TV and stand alone and get what you want to watch. TV viewing has never been better. it's
but that said, something to keep an eye on is Peacock.
Yep.
Now, Peacock had a slow launch, a slow rollout to Comcast subscribers. They're going to be launching nationally on July 15th. So that's now less than 2 weeks away. And what's very strange about Peacock, which was just announced yesterday, they've acquired a number of shows from the CBS Viacom library, which really makes kind of no sense because they're a competitor, and you would think the CBS Viacom product would go to CBS All Access. But on the flip side to this coin, basically, is there's so many of these streamers now that you have to pay for. So you really have to cherry pick now, which ones do I want to spend money on? If you're going to choose all of them, you're going to have a hefty bill every month because $10 here, $8 here, $12 here, it adds up at some point.
Yeah.
But I would check out Peacock, particularly if you're a fan of the Dick Wolf product.
Yeah.
Dick Wolf has, right now he has 2 FBI shows on CBS. He has 2 more Law and Orders coming out on NBC. Well, one on NBC, one on Peacock. He's got SVU's going into, season 22 next year. If you like that kind of product, go to Peacock. They're going to be doing A Brave New World. They're going to have a new series based on the book of the same name, which might be interesting. And again, that's going to be launching on July 15th. So if you want to check that out, you have another option to go to.
That's awesome. I didn't even know that they were launching on July 5th. I haven't kept up. Yeah. Obviously with COVID and watching all this stuff, and honestly, we're big Disney fans in our house. A lot of our family works for the mouse. So, and we just love that product. And like you said, one of the shows that I can't say enough about is The Mandalorian. Star Wars, The Mandalorian. It's addicting. You fall in love with this little green creature. It's like automatic. I've talked about it on Fan Fridays before with our friends from AMC's Comic Book Men, Ming Chen when he was on. We all geek out on Baby Yoda. That's where you find out. If you haven't taken the time. That one, I really like The Golden State Killer. I started watching that. Amazing documentary. I'm into that. I really love these murder documentaries. HBO, they have the good one. They also had, I can't remember his name, the famous New Yorker, or infamous. He was the bad son of the real estate team that he confessed to murders accidentally with a hot mic. I forget his name. He was like, killed his wife. He's crazy. Richard something, or I forget his name, but I'll put it in the notes when I remember. But just so many amazing TV coming out. So it's hard to pick which one, and you're right about streaming. It's so easy for like me. I keep doing these 7-day testers, and I just binged. Well, I cheated totally, and I'm confessing my sins right now to the TV critic. But I love Billions on Showtime, but it's hard to justify the expense when that's the only show on Showtime I watch is the series Billions. I absolutely love that cast. They have, the guy who plays Axelrod on the show is one of my favorite. He was in, Band of Brothers, which I think he did a fabulous job. Again, I ask the question to anybody is, why do the English actors always do our accent better than we do our own accent? Because I had just like, what's his name from Walking Dead? He's an Englishman. It's funny, all the English guys are really ridiculously good at our accent. So it's...
Well, that reminds me of a show on Showtime that's going to be streaming on Peacock, which again is a little strange. The Affair.
Yeah.
You had two UK actors on that show that sounded they sounded better than we do here. But that was a favorite show of mine. I didn't love the last season, but if you haven't seen The Affair, it really tells you the story of what happens to, a supposedly happily married guy with 4 children, and he goes up to the Hamptons for a summer vacation, meets a local waitress, has an affair. And then everything falls apart after that, and that's a show that I was glued to the TV every time that came back. And again, that's going to be streaming on Peacock. You had 5 seasons, I believe, so you have about 50 episodes. So that could keep you going for a while. But what's interesting about Eric about all of this is you have an outlet like Disney Plus. What they did right was they introduced original shows that seemed to work. We talked about The Mandalorian, with a very vast library. What Apple TV didn't do was they came out with some very good product. The morning show with Jennifer Aniston has certainly gotten a lot of critical attention, and I actually really like it. But other than that, can you really think of any shows on Apple TV? So they didn't have a library.
Yeah.
And then every streamer is a little different. Apple TV, this is not the primary business for them. They're not as concerned about this. Same thing with Amazon. But of course, it's a different story for Netflix, which survives on subscribers. And let me tell you, Netflix is just through the roof. I think there's about 183 million subscribers now. They went up significantly during COVID-19. They've gotten a lot more subscribers, and well-deserved. So when it comes to recommending shows, my suggestion is, find a streamer, find an outlet that, that has the type of shows you want, and get yourself a nice cup of coffee or a cold drink and a snack and sit there, because if you know what streaming does that drives me crazy, like with Dead to Me, the episode ends, then you have like 5 seconds before the next one begins. So by the time you grab the remote, the episode began and you can't get up.
I think that's why we end up watching season after season of The Office accidentally, because it just goes and you're just like, it's one endless episode of Dwight and Jim and Michael Scott. So, it's one of those things. So, it's funny that you talk about one of the shows I really liked the past few summers, and it's kind of fallen off, which I was disappointed to see, was Animal Kingdom. I love that show on TNT. It was like Last Ship. Last Ship was good the first 2 seasons, and then I understand it became a money thing with one of the leads, but Animal Kingdom, amazing series, really crossing almost every line that you could cross. Of course, TNT's like, yeah, it's our job. We're really good at doing that. But it's a really good series that I think is, I don't even know if they're doing it. I don't think they're going to release. I don't think they filmed. I think they canceled that show, or I don't know. I haven't seen any advertisements for it.
From what I understand, it's still alive. It's interesting because once upon a time, TNT had some really good dramas. So did USA. Because USA had a bunch of cookie cutter like a Royal Pains or Monk or whatever, but it really worked for them. TNT started coming out with some very good dramas. I'm still annoyed at them for screwing the remake of Dallas and not giving us a finale. They left us on with a cliffhanger. But then ultimately, everyone started talking about Netflix, and then the other streamers. And now a lot of these shows that you would watch on cable, you could now watch on a streamer because they have the library. So when you talk about a streamer, the library is imperative. It's imperative. It's not just about looking forward to the new shows. Ultimately, I'm counting down the days to when Stranger Things comes back, but they haven't even filmed the season yet, so I have a lot of days I'm going to have to wait. But there's so much there to choose, and so many different places. So really, the winner, the winner out of this whole COVID thing is Netflix. Yep. Wow, what did they really step up to the plate? They had so much good product out there. However, I'm going to say this till I'm blue in the face. This could be another conversation. Network television is not dead. It's not. It's not by any means. Not in a long shot. And then the next equation is live sports.
Oh,
it's going to start. It's going to start rolling out slowly. We're going to see baseball, NBA stuff. You're going to start seeing little by little. Yep. So. But then again, it's going to be kind of strange to see it without anyone watching it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting topic, and I wanted to talk about sports before we get your picks. But it's interesting because you have the NBA started officially yesterday was there. Everybody started going back to training camp. You're seeing the videos. It's great. You're having more and more players either test positive. I believe the number just came out. They had a record. 348 people have tested positive for COVID within the NBA, which is amazing when you start thinking we're going to have training camp for the NFL starting soon. Spring training is obviously going to start happening again. So we have sports all converging for the first time in July, which typically July, if you're a sports fan, you're competing with watching baseball. And the last 4 or 5 years, or actually 7, I've done some work with them, so I don't want to offend them. CrossFit, filming their CrossFit games and airing that. Not a big, just a niche brand, but that's typically your sports in July. Baseball and that. You have the traditionally, right around my mother's birthday, which is in a week, is the All-Star Game. So you have the Home Run Derby. And we don't have that this year. It's a 50-game season, and it's all really quick. But it's going to be interesting with TV how that affects the viewing for the first time ever, having all of these sports basically on top of each other. With the NBA, the NFL is rumored to, they have not confirmed it, but they're chopping 2 of their 4 preseason games. So Game 1 and Game 4 are now out. They've canceled the Hall of Fame game. So one of our producers, Butch Seltzer, is not very happy his Pittsburgh Steelers that he was going to go see in the Hall of Fame game. He can't go do that, but I guess they're going to do it next year. It's going to be interesting when we add all this in, TV, and now movies being brought straight over with, like, Hamilton. That was supposed to get released to theaters, and Disney said, we're going to put it on. Let's do it July. I mean, those are the folks, I think, that are leading the way. Apple, I guess, has a couple new shows coming out. Tom Hanks is in one, I believe. I need to research that before I run. I just know I watched a preview of it. But, a lot of cool things. But before you go, we love your list. I know so many folks out there are like, okay, we watched Marc's recommendations. You got to get them. So I know we talked about one, and I always talk about The Office, so it wouldn't be complete if one of your recommendations did not include Mindy Keeling or someone from the cast of The Office. So what are your go-to picks that you're recommending until you come back on our show, which will be in a few weeks, so people have a couple weeks to watch so we can get feedback? What are your shows that you're recommending on this episode?
Well, you know what I want to recommend, not because I think it's the best show. It certainly is not. But if you were a fan of Unsolved Mysteries, and that ran on NBC for a number of seasons, it was quite successful for them. And it kind of talks about, what you were, this whole crime aura. There's a lot of interest in crime solving, and that was rebooted on Netflix, and it just began. It just started streaming this week. And you have a season of that if you really want to check out Unsolved Mysteries. I watched the first episode. I wasn't a huge fan, but I think if you were a fan of it, I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I think that's something that can entertain you. There's a show you talked about, Mindy Kaling. I have a real problem with the title of this show. And I'm looking at my cheat sheet because I wrote it down. Never Have I Never? Is that what it's called?
I think that's it. Yeah, Never Have I Never. We can just. That's what we'll claim it. We're going to claim that that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. We're renaming the show for value that they didn't name their show, easy for us to remember.
Well, you know what? It's a really cool show about a teenage Indian girl. And, it's kind of a coming-of-age story, the trials and tribulations and her life and, her family. And, I don't want to give away too much of it, but it's really like a nice nostalgic slice of life. And it's and what I really like about, the environment around it right now, there is more diversity, which is critical, because I think what shows need to do, which they not always have, is they have to show the world as it is. So that's one show that I'm really, quite proud of, and I think that's worth checking out. I have to mention again, I've said this already, I said it before in our other podcast, you've got to check out Dead to Me. If you haven't seen it, I just think, it's dramatic, it's funny. Linda Cardinelli is outstanding. So is Christina Applegate. So I would watch that. If you're a Star Wars fan, I would absolutely check out The Mandalorian and stick with Disney Plus, and that you'll have hours of entertainment, in terms of in that category. And again, I mentioned Unorthodox last time. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and check it out. And Little Fires Everywhere on Hulu is another show. Not the best show out there, but a show that's going to keep you at the edge of your seats. And the way it ends, it leaves you hanging, which means there better be a second season because I'd like to know what's going to happen. And then of course all the off-network stuff. So if you want to just have a grand old time, or you want to just watch a good comedy, check out The Office, or go to Hallmark and watch I Love Lucy. I still laugh at those episodes. I've seen them how many times already? And thankfully, I wasn't alive at the time I Love Lucy was on live. But I mean, there's nothing like an old comedy to just kind of like take away your troubles, and you'll forget there was even COVID-19. And then again, of course, our conversation would have been so different if we didn't have the pandemic, because we'd be talking about the Summer Olympics.
We would be. Which would be starting this very month, about 2 weeks away, was the kickoff. Crazy that we're going to have the 2020 Olympics in July of 2021. That's going to be a mouthful, and they're even marketing it as the Olympics of 2020. I don't understand that.
That's even worse than never have I never, or whatever that's called.
That is never have I ever. Yeah,
never have I ever, not never. Never have I ever. Okay, watch it. You'll like it.
We'll go with that one. But you're right. The Olympics, there's just so much that's been changed. COVID-19 has changed a lot. But you're right about watching older shows. I find myself doing that. If I see a Dick Van Dyke or, what was I just watching? Carol Burnett show was on. And I don't know how it ended up. I was up late the other night working, and I was surfing YouTube TV. Love my YouTube TV, by the way. And it was there, and I clicked it on, and I was like, sometimes just the humor. I mean, even being raised on like Archie Bunker, right? Like that humor, speaking of Reiner, as we started the episode talking about, right? Just kind of, you watch these shows and you just laugh at the snarky humor. But a lot of it, which is scary, a lot of the topics talked about in the 60s and 70s could actually be present today in a lot that we're talking about. I mean, a lot of barriers were broken through, color barriers were broken through, just so much thanks to the likes of the Dick Van Dyke Show and, Mary Tyler Moore and even the Jeffersons, who we haven't even talked about. I mean, if you look at all these shows from the 60s and the 70s and what they've been talking about and put the date as today and update what they're wearing, they're still talking about the same things we're talking about. It's funny how television tells our story and we can kind of watch it. So it's interesting.
Well, you could watch, if you'd like to watch the Carl Burnett Show, you could watch every weeknight at 11:30 on MeTV. And I remember a few years ago, I interviewed Vicki Lawrence. My favorite skit, hands down, was The Family with Mama and Eunice. And I remember talking to Vicki Lawrence, and I couldn't get through the interview without cracking up, because every time I talked about one of the skits, I would laugh. But I just want to tell you, I love TV trivia, like tidbits. I just have to tell you one thing about the Jeffersons. I'll make it very quick.
Sweet.
And this is interesting. You're going to be shocked when I tell you this. When the Jeffersons began in 1975 on CBS, let me ask you this question. Isabel Sanford played Louise, and Sherman Hemsley was George. How old do you think they were when that show started? Each of them in real life. How old do you think they were?
Late 20s.
How about this? Okay, Sherman Hemsley was 36, and Isabel Sanford was 57.
Holy Toledo, really? Wow.
No wonder why Mother Jefferson hated Wheezy. She robbed the cradle.
She did?
She was older than him.
Wow, I never knew that. That's like the trivia when people talk about not Hill Street Blues, but 21 Jump Street with like Johnny Depp and all those folks. When you watch those shows and you're like, Johnny Depp was like a baby in that. I mean, but then you see him in Platoon, which a lot of people don't believe me when I say he was in Platoon, and he was.
Yeah.
He was very young in Platoon, but he was in Platoon. But that's interesting. I did not know the age difference like that.
There's a ton of those age things. There's so many examples, but. And honestly, I think one of my favorite interviews with a classic star, when I spoke with Isabel Sanford, oh my gosh, did I enjoy that? Yeah. What Oh, was that a great conversation? But so yeah, if you want to just escape and just there's so many places you can go for all this nostalgia. And then you have the diginets, like I mentioned, MeTV.
Yeah.
You know, you can go watch the Waltons every day, which is what I do because I just like happiness. I like a happy family. So there you go.
I love that you brought up one quick one that we've been watching here. We introduced our 13-year-old boy and our almost, I hate to say this, she's almost a month away from turning 16. And that's you know what I'm talking about. So you feel my father chest pains. That father chest pain when you say 16 and daughter. But we found HBO Max, which we like. I mean, it's really an ugly logo. Like, they did themselves no favors in making that thing look attractive. And the colors but it's just not eye-pleasing. But they have the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on.
Oh.
And to watch that as remembering watching it growing up and loving it, thinking how cutting edge Will Smith as young. But my wife and our kids started watching it and they started like, wow, you guys wore a lot of bright colors. But wow. And all of a sudden we start watching, especially season 1, you got Don Cheadle as his best friend besides Jazzy Jeff, right? Don Cheadle, who has Oscars, but he's playing some thug from Philly, right? And it's just funny because you go through and you remember guys like Damon Wayans and those guys. Everybody was typecast back in the day, especially Don Cheadle. I mean, he was always like a gangster, like, you know, some sort of like tough guy. And now he's completely different. I mean, he's a Marvel comic book hero now. So it's interesting to watch it. But Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is so refreshing because it crossed so many lines in the 90s. Yeah. And it was funny to do it. And our kids, having never seen it and not being raised around it, and us watching it again in almost new eyes, it's very refreshing. So I'm telling you, if you're kind of like, okay, maybe the older stuff we've talked about isn't your thing, go watch some stuff from the early 90s where you start seeing what we're talking about today, officially today, was amazing on TV. What Will Smith and that show did, which people kind of frowned upon, but has a crazy cult following, they crossed every barrier you could cross. He was a judge. Carlton was, his own character, Hillary as, the gold digger, and then Will, who's like basically like every teenager today, but was Will Smith, who was unheard of at the time. I mean,
well, it's interesting. I was working at NBC at the time, and another thing Fresh Prince did, which people don't realize, was it really stressed the importance of demographics because Fresh Prince and Blossom, which led out of it, brought in an enormous teen base, and NBC was thrilled at the time to get all these young viewers that were watching these sitcoms. It never was a huge, total audience. It wasn't getting 20 million viewers. It wasn't certainly like what you got on Must See TV on Thursday, but it was bringing in teens and young adults, and NBC was really happy with that. And then the one thing I have to mention about Don Cheadle, as long as you mention him, do you remember him on Golden Palace?
Yeah, right?
That was the spin-off from the Golden Girls, and he's working in a hotel with 3 of the Golden Girls. I'm like, what are you doing here in this hotel? And the season, it only lasted 1 season.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny to see these guys before they come and telling our kids how at one time Saturday Night Live did have a competition with Mad TV trying to do the same thing. And if you look at that Mad TV cast, some of it's actually, their humor level is more cutting edge and almost, I was telling my kids how Saturday Night Live during the time of Mad TV had to up their game to get as edgy as Mad TV was doing, because you remember what they were doing. I mean, that cast was amazing and on edge in the things they covered, and Saturday Night Live had to up their game because at that time they were having that lull after Adam had left and Farley and Spade and Rock. I mean, an amazing Saturday Night Live cast. But I still watch those, and that's another thing. I don't know why we didn't recommend this. This is Eric's recommendation, old Saturday Night Live episodes. My kids laugh at the Jeopardy that Will Ferrell did with all of those amazing cast members that they've had there with Norm Macdonald, who I wish him the best in a speedy recovery. I hear he's having a pretty major fight with cancer at this time. Norm Macdonald, the Tom Hanks episode where Tom is a host and he shows up and he's a contestant on there. Jimmy Fallon. Just the folks that they get to do it. And the Sean Connery skits are to die for. The Burt Reynolds. Saturday Night Live wins on those older ones, or the old skits with Adam and Rock and Spade and Farley. When you watch Farley cause all of them to break character so often, it's amazing when you go back and watch and see. I mean, Chris Farley was one of the funniest people I've ever watched, and to watch him make Adam Sandler break character over and over again, I'm pretty sure it was a game that they played, because they were really ridiculously good at getting each other to break character real fast.
Well, you know, I still think probably my one of my favorite skits on Saturday Night Live, and I don't want to admit this, but I'm old enough to remember watching the original episodes in the mid '70s. But I remember the skit Coffee Talk, when Roseanne and Madonna were and Mike Myers was talking about
Coffee Talk.
Barbra Streisand, and then she popped in.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my god.
Oh, and Mike's reaction to it was so. But that's good. I mean, I tell my kids, like, go watch when Michael Jordan was a co-host, right? I mean, they have him in front of the mirror, and he's like, I'll be better today. And it's just funny to have, that was the first time you saw athletes show up on Saturday Night Live. And since, it's been great because you saw Peyton Manning's been on there. I mean, it's just Saturday Night Live is something that takes us all, because I've watched those original episodes and those episodes in the 80s. And, Joe Piscopo, who's kind of an unknown, but his skit as Sinatra with Murphy as, Stevie. It just is, it's humor that makes you laugh. And I think we need laughter. As much as I love a good murder show and true crime, I love laughing. So turning on those and YouTube, you win because you have them all there. And it's just watching it, going back and seeing like Jimmy Fallon before he's Jimmy Fallon today.
It's amazing when you stop and think of, look, the show started in 1975, so do the math. It's 45 years old. It's never going to end.
Not quite. Hey, it's not quite. We're going to say it's 44 because some people's birthdays are from 1975. Maybe the host of the show. So we're going to call it 44 years old because it makes me feel better.
Yeah, but let me put it to you this way. It's going to outlive us all, that show. And it kind of takes it back to the original conversation we had in this, this week, was back to your show of shows. Because if viewers had the opportunity to see that show, they would talk about some of the skits. But then everybody remembers SNL as being the forefront of sketch comedy. And of course, in late night, nothing can compete with it. But man, oh man, there is, and so many of those actors have gone on to such big careers. I mean, that's a stepping stone. If you get on that show, oh my gosh, you have so many open doors after that if you can manage to get on that show. And it shows no signs of slowing down. And then the question, of course, is what will they do this fall? Yeah. Are they going to shoot without a studio audience? I mean, how are they going to do it? So that's the next question, but we'll have to wait and see. We still have a few months to worry about that.
And again, Netflix wins because a lot of their cast has done stand-up sketch comedy on there. Like the Weekend News folks both have stand-ups that, by the way, if you haven't watched them on Netflix, go check them out. They are hilarious. They're very poignant and on point, filmed right before COVID-19 hit. So, I mean, it is funny, and we didn't talk about this, but hey, it's my show. We can go a little long. I was watching Billions in one of the final episodes because they split the series in half, which they had no idea COVID was hitting. I mean, it was talked about. In the final episode, as they split the series and they're going to film the second half, which is going to be interesting, how they're going to pull that off. Kelly Coyne, he's awesome. He plays Dollar Bill. He's also on The Americans. He's a fabulous actor. His father was a politician. Shout out Rip City because he's always supporting the Portland Trailblazers, so we love him. But he was talking about how they split it, but in this episode, out of the blue, they're talking about COVID-19, and you're just like, this is an episode where you kind of see them foreshadowing what was coming without knowing, and now you don't know, you're kind of like, okay, we know you're going to film again, but The Mandalorian, all of those shows kind of ended, and you're just like, oh, I can wait till September, and I keep telling people, well, you might have to wait longer. Think of it like Game of Thrones. We had to wait a long time for Thrones to come back on, and it was worth the wait, so let's get everybody healthy so we can film and get this on. But I do hope Saturday Night Live figures a way to broadcast because we need it. We need to laugh. They've been on point. Last season was one of their best seasons ever. And it wouldn't be election season if we don't have them doing election specials. So,
you know what? No. I mean, yeah, particularly that's with the election
Yeah.
coming up. Saturday Night Live is that it goes hand in hand with that show. So without that, would be an enormous loss. And yeah, I mean, anyone that thinks they're going to get their shows back in September. I mean, look, remember we waited there was a lapse in The Sopranos for 2 years. I remember there was a 2 year lapse before we got new episodes, and then it came on. And so yeah, we're going to have to just wait and be patient. And in the interim, you have plenty of options now. There's plenty of places to go to, and plenty of choices. But also get out and get some fresh air.
Absolutely. And when you do go out, to add to that, make sure you PSA, wear your mask. Don't be one of those people.
Your mask.
Yeah, wear your mask. I don't know why somebody, then we're not going to be political and get on topic, but wear your mask. Go outside, get the exercise. I think that's key so much. Go out. We have sunlight. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Go out. We got the sun. Well, it's not out today, but it's because it's not July 5th here yet. And once it becomes July 5th, the sun peaks out. And until late October, we have the best weather on the planet because we don't get above like 90. And it's sunny and beautiful. And we have mountains with snow on top of them. And occasionally it'll rain overnight and cool everything down again. So you get happy. But I'm looking forward to that. I love the sunlight. So go out, wear your mask. But at least when you're inside, you don't have to wear your mask. And you can watch Marc's amazing recommendations and maybe a few of mine. Mine are probably too violent for most people to watch. They're like, what does he watch? I mean, and don't watch the news. That's really depressing. Don't. Just.
Yeah, just keep your intake of the news, which is what I do. I
watch Trevor Noah. That's where I get my news now. Trevor Noah provides me my news every day on his show on Comedy Central. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I used to get my news was Jon Stewart back in the day. I mean, I like to laugh and kind of learn at the same time. I can't do the network news. But anyways, I appreciate you. Oh, by the way, before you go, I totally agree with you about, well, I don't. But network TV's not dead because my mother-in-law, shout out to Tammy, she loves Survivor.
So do I. It's my favorite show.
See? Okay, I know now 2 people who watch it because I'm always like, is my mother-in-law the only reason why this show stays on? No way. Big Brother, all of those shows that she loves. I mean, she's always calling me up. She was the one who called me up. Eric, do you have CBS All Access yet? And I'm like, no, why? Have you watched Picard? And she's like, goes down the list. So whenever we're together, it's always like this laundry list of shows have you watched? And my wife and I feel bad because we have our kids. We're not when we watch TV, we sit down, it's at night, and we binge watch late into the night because that's our time. We like our popcorn, we put our food down, we put our phones down, and we get into, we absorb by it because we spend so much time talking about it. But we'll go off of your recommendations, and I will second Orthodox. Oh my God. If I had more thumbs to put up, I would. I only have 2. So.
Well, tell your mother-in-law, but that by the time this airs, there's a possibility there'll be news of the new season of Big Brother because it is coming. It is apparently going to be returning players. There's going to be a variety of different people. So it is expected to premiere at the end of this month. I thought by now they would have announced it. My only concern is there seems to be a number of rising cases of the coronavirus in LA, so I don't know if that's the reason they haven't announced it yet, but it looks like they are going to move forward. We will have a summer season of Big Brother. Survivor apparently is coming back in the fall, but they have not said what it's going to be yet, so I don't know. Normally
just wake up and survive. That's what it's just survive another day in America. Can you do it?
I've never missed an episode of Survivor in 40 editions, however many there have been. It's been on for 20 years. I've seen every episode of Survivor. And what a strange way for the season to end with Tony Blotches winning $2 million at home with his wife and 2 kids. I'm like, why? It kind of took away from it, but It is what it is, and enjoy what's out there, and hopefully we'll have Big Brother back very soon.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. As always, we'll have you back in just a few short weeks to give your recommendations, because sooner than later you're going to show up here and we're going to start talking about fall TV, which will be scary, and then sooner or later we'll be talking about holiday picks. I do know in July a lot of networks are showing Christmas specials. I've been reading a lot about those, so if you're one of those people who needs to get a Christmas fix in July, you're sick in the head, for one, my opinion, and 2,
Right.
It's like, why do you don't need to watch Christmas specials. It's fine. I tell my wife it's cool.
Channel, Christmas in July, that's what they do.
Well, on a side note, XM Radio, I listen to it in my office besides in my car, and they now offer the holiday channel year-round. So if you need a Christmas fix on music, XM has that channel available for you, and I'm just like, why? What sicko is listening to this?
Eric, it's very simple. If you need your Christmas fix, I'm sure everyone has It's a Wonderful Life on DVD. True. Pop it in, watch it, and you'll tear up at the end, like I do. I've seen it 100 times, and that's. But I only watch It's a Wonderful Life during the holidays.
That's how I feel about Die Hard. I only watch Die Hard during the Christmas season.
It's a holiday movie, right?
It is. People argue with me that it's not, but the first two are Christmas movies. It is, absolutely.
It's a holiday movie.
It is. Absolutely. So, perfect. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate you, my friend. Have a great 4th of July weekend. We'll see you in a few short weeks. And make sure you go check out Marc and all his recommendations and leave us a message on our YouTube channel what you think of his recommendations. And if you need any more, Marc will answer those because we'll tell him that they're there. Give him your feedback on what you think about his list. So, Marc, thank you so much, my friend, and have a happy 4th of July.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thanks.
Let's get to the point.